Welcome to the Lights Camera Pro podcast, where we interview entertainment pros about their careers and how they became successful in the industry. The secrets to their success here every week. Here's your host, Shawn Ventura.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Lights Camera Pro podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Ventura, and today we have a special guest, Atlanta stand-up comic, actor, and host, Lace Larrabee. She's hilarious. We have a fun conversation about comedy and being on the road and what it takes to be good at stand-up. Here we go. Okay, Lace Larrabee is here, and she's a comedian and an actor. And thanks so much for doing this, Lace.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to have something to do during the apocalypse.
Yes. And this is very cool because I saw you at the Gaslight. You were hosting for your friend. I forget her name. But it was very funny.
Thank you.
Let's just start with the first question. How did you know? How old were you? When did you know that you wanted to be a comedian or an actor?
I knew I wanted to perform as early as my memory goes. So there's not a time that I didn't consider the fact that I needed to be in front of groups of people with all of them facing me and me doing something.
and did that stuff, like, were you like 5 and you're doing little shows for your family in the living room and dressing up?
That's exactly what I did. So I would do that in the living room at home. And then my favorite performance space was at my grandparents' house in Warner Robins, Georgia. They had one of those like 1960s tri-level houses, right? So there was this perfect area where you could create a stage at the top of the stairs and everyone could sit in the living room, which of course to get into the living room, they would have to buy tickets from me, yes, with play money and tickets that I created. I'm sure illegible tickets. And then they would buy those and they would have to sit and wait. And I would come out of one of the bedrooms. So that would be my wing off the stage. And then I would perform at the top of the stairs and of course use the stairs, as multi-levels to perform on. But yeah, these would all be sketches of things that I wrote in my head that were poorly executed and not well planned, but everyone would laugh and smile and clap and pray that it would be over soon.
And were you dressing up or singing, or was it just like straight like little comedy skits?
Oh, it was a combo, man. No one told me I couldn't sing yet. So yeah, there would definitely be some musical numbers
nice.
with, no background music to go along with it. Of course I was dressing up. So at that house, so my parents are really young. This will come into play for this conversation. It'll make a lot more sense. But my parents had me when they were teenagers. And so, and then my mom had a gap of like 11 years. It was her and then a sister who's 3 years younger. And then there was a gap of 11 years and then another brother and sister, right? So the brother and sister are actually like, my aunt and uncle are only like 6 and 7 years older than me.
Okay.
So they were in that house as well. So I had all of my aunt's clothes to dress up in, and she still had leftover dress up clothes from when she was a kid. So my go-to was always, she had for some reason these like crinolines, which do you know what a crinoline is?
No.
Okay, so when you see like big dresses, like ball gowns, it's no longer in style or anything now, but like big poofy dresses or old timey dresses, to make them big, you would put these layers of fluffy. It's like a skirt under a skirt, right?
Okay.
Big fluffy skirts that they're not meant to be seen on the outside. They only go under, it's undergarments.
Right.
Well, anyway, she had a bunch of these, and those were my go-to. That was my outfit. So I would put these big crinolines on, which, like I said, are not meant to be on the outside of the clothes, and match them with some insane top that I would find. And yeah, that would make me feel like a movie star,
Right.
So I'd wear those and then perform. And there's a great little blurry picture of me doing that. And I dragged my little sister along with me. So yeah, I was like 6, 7, and my sister's like 5 years younger than me. So poor little thing. She had no option. She had no
idea what she was doing.
She had no idea what she was being forced into.
Right.
And she had, no option but to go along with it. Yeah.
Right. So, did you do any comedy, or were you in any plays in high school, or what happened after that?
Yeah, so everyone knew I was a ham. And when I was 9, my family had moved away from Warner Robins. I've always lived in Georgia, but just different areas. And anyone who knows the state knows that, I mean, it feels like 2 different states if you just go a few hours up or down the road. And so we had moved from Warner Robins up to North Georgia. And there was this one night we get a phone call from my grandma, who is like, oh my God, Ginger, which is my mom. Ginger, you got to come down here because in Perry, which is near Warner Robins, there is a Julia Roberts movie being filmed. They are asking for extras. They need like 2,000 people. You got to get down here, bring Lace down here, because as a kid, everybody would tell me that I looked like Julia Roberts when I was little, which, you know, I did look like a little mini version of her when I was little, but mainly just because I had a massive mouth and horse teeth and my face hadn't like matched up with those yet. So I just had this big giant mouth. And
that was Steel Magnolias or something else?
Oh, no, that would have been, that was like in the late 80s. So this was,
Runaway Bride.
This was like, no, before that, it's called Something to Talk About. It was Dennis Quaid, Julia Roberts, Keira Sedgwick was in it, Lauren Bacall. There were all these, or no, not Lauren Bacall, Jenna Rollins. Anyway, incredible cast. And my mom was like, no, I can't take off work to do all that. A couple days in, they were filming there for weeks. And they needed extras for a bunch of these scenes. And so finally my mom gave in on the weekend. It was like, we'll go down there. So we go down there, and she lied our way in to get me into this arena. They were filming at this agriculture center. They were doing these horse jumping scenes. And we get up there, and my mom's like, we're here to go in. You know, we stood in this line at like 5 a.m. And we get up to the table to sign in, and we don't have the little slips, you know, that you're supposed to have as an extra. And they're like, sorry, we don't have you. My mom's like, well, we are supposed to be on the list. We are supposed to be here. She like makes up a name, so-and-so. And the people at the counter, or the table, they didn't care. It was just extras, you know? So they're like, whatever, 2 extra bodies. We're not going to turn you away. You've been standing in line for 2 hours. So they were like, here, fill this out. Come on in. So she lied our way in. We got there. Long story short, I got pulled out of the audience as an extra. They made me a feature extra and put me in some more like close-up scenes. And I got to meet Julia Roberts.
Nice.
It was the most magical experience of my life. Even though now looking back, I'm like, oh my God, extras are treated so horribly. But at the time, I thought, you know, holy shit, this is it. Like I've made it. I'm about to be shot up to stardom. Yeah. Can't wait. This is my moment. Christina Ricci, here I come.
Yeah.
And so I was, it was amazing. We were on set every day for like 9 days around these massive stars, and I got to see all the ins and outs of how everything worked, and they were really cool to the extras. And and that was it, man. I got my first money. That was the first time I was paid for acting work, and my parents were like, all right, this might be it. So fast forward, we go home. My mom like figures out all the ins and outs of like how to go about getting representation and headshots and all that. So that's what we did. We had no money. My parents were working like 2 jobs apiece. Like I said, they were young when they had me. So, you know, things weren't easy. They were sacrificing a lot to just, you know, kind of help me chase this dream. And so, starting at like 9-10 years old, we did it. We figured it out. My mom put me in like these model searches, and I ended up getting an agent through that. And I started auditioning for commercials and booked a couple commercials, did a lot of print work. And then when I was 12, we ended up having to move from my mom's job. She got a big job. She became a State Farm agent, and they moved us to the middle of nowhere in rural South Georgia. And that was the end of that, you know, short-lived career that I had in acting. But so that was it.
So where do you go from there? You're in South Georgia. Yeah. And you get into pageants now, or are you doing something else?
Yeah, that's it. So I didn't have another option, right? I was this kid who like had these big dreams, and I had tasted the other side. I was like, I know, what this can be. And I thought my whole life was over because I was being forced to move down there. But ultimately it was the best decision for our family because, it was the first time my parents didn't have to work 2 jobs and we owned our own business. My mom was on billboards and, things were on the up and up for them. But for me, I was like, great, this is the end. So my only option for performing was church, which we didn't attend. So like they would do Christmas pageants, not beauty pageants, but do Christmas like plays and stuff.
Yeah.
And that was it. There was 1 red light in the whole town, 2 red lights in the whole county. I mean, literally, we're talking middle of nowhere. And there were a lot of pageants, though. That's the other thing. Boys played football and girls did pageants, and that was it. And so I entered a pageant, and they were having it was at my school, and my mom was like, oh my God, what the hell are you getting us into now? But I really wanted to. So my story was so unlike, when people picture pageant kids, they picture these like overbearing psycho mothers who force their kids to, do something that they always wanted to do. So they could live vicariously through them. And mine was the opposite of that. I was forcing my parents into letting me do this. Uh-huh. And so we rented a dress for $50. I entered the pageant and I won.
Wow. First one.
First one I was ever in. I won. I think it was because I had that like new, fresh, newbie, fresh face. And I wasn't.
I don't even know,
robot.
Lace, do you have to do like the talent portion for these pageants or?
Pageants it's hard to describe what, there's so many different types. Like you have to be in the world of pageants to like understand, but not all pageants have talent.
Okay.
Not all pageants have like a speaking portion, or some are just walk across the stage, smile, say.
Right. I was just curious if it like helped you, like you did a little few jokes or something. No.
So the first ones that I was in were just walk across the stage, be cute, say your name, walk off stage pageants, and it's just really about poise and confidence. And then you get into, then there's other layers. And then, so ultimately, I ended up doing pageants for like 14 years of my life. I started when I was like 13, won the first one, and I ended up paying for most of my college performing in the Miss America organization. So I went to Miss Georgia 4 times, which you have to earn your way there. So I earned a bunch of titles. I got really, really involved in pageants eventually, but it's mainly because I wanted to do talent, and the talent ones were in the Miss America system. And so that's what I was working my way up to. And I was like, I want to get, like, I love performing and I enjoyed like the walking across the stage part, that's fine. But what I wanted to do was get into the ones with interview and talent so I could show my skills. And, when you don't have other options, that's what you do. And I loved it. And I was actually really good at it and found something to obsess over and get better at. And that's what I did. So yeah, I ended up doing comedic monologues as my talent for my 7 years in the Miss America organization.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
And how do you go from pageants to stand-up? Is that the next thing, or how does that transition?
Yeah, so you age out of pageants, right? That whole thing is only they end. You can't continue to do it. Like there's like 21 pages of a contract that you sign every time you enter one of those Miss America-based pageants, and there's all these crazy, antiquated rules and all this stuff. But you can't have been married. You can't have done all this. You can't be over the age of 25 by the time you would win the Miss America crown, if that was what happened. So I technically aged out at 23 because that's just the way it works. You have to win a local, then you have to win a state, then you have to get there. And if by that time it would have happened, I would have been 25. So I aged out at 23 and then had to find other stuff to do. And, by that time I was living in the town that I had gone to college in, and I was working. And I still wanted to perform. So I was still, attempting acting. Like I got an agent and was doing auditions here and there where I could. And I loved comedy. Comedy is one of those things that like if you love it and you listen to it and you secretly dream about doing it professionally one day, you don't know where to start.
Right.
Right. And I wasn't related to anybody in the arts or in, entertainment in any way. So everything I've always done, I've just kind of like either stumbled into it or figured it out. And comedy, I didn't know anyone who did it, but I loved it. And I obsessively listened to stand up. I obsessively watched stand up, even as a kid. Like, my family is very funny. They're hilarious. And they would let me listen to stuff that I had no business listening to. So I was like,
did you have a favorite comedian growing up, or?
Oh, I had so many. I mean, we had like all the Eddie Murphy, like we had Eddie Murphy Raw and Delirious, like on vinyl at the house.
Right.
And so they would let me listen to that, which I definitely shouldn't have. Richard Pryor. I listened to a lot of Richard Pryor.
Right.
And
so good.
yeah. And then when Comedy Central came around, holy shit, that was it. Like, that was the holy grail, right? Like, you could see every comedian. And so I just loved any comedian I could find on TV. I loved Ellen DeGeneres. She might've been probably one of my favorites. I liked everybody. I just loved stand-up comedy. I appreciated it. And then when, I got older, I would have the comedy stations on my Sirius XM in my car all the time. And long story short, I was bartending, and this regular came in one day, and he had a wallet that had Mitch Hedberg's face on it. And I was like, is that Mitch Hedberg? And he's like, yeah. I was like, how the hell did you get a Mitch Hedberg wallet? He's like, I got it on Etsy. I was like, oh man, that's awesome. I love Mitch. He's like, you know Mitch Hedberg? I was like, of course yes. And so this was like another comedy nerd. And so he and I would just talk comedy all the time when he would come in. And one day he started doing open mics, and he would come in always to tell me about, his little journey in stand-up in Atlanta. And then one day, like, I think it was like 2-3 years into him doing stand-up, he started running different shows in town. And it's so funny because the restaurant that I bartended in is directly across the street from where the now Atlanta Punchline is. Okay. Because the Punchline's inside the Landmark Diner. Right. And 8 years ago, there was a club there that was called Jerry Farber's Side Door. And my regular, his name's Richie, and Richie's like, listen, I've got a show coming up. You're going to do it. You love stand-up so much. You're so funny. Because I was, snarky, and I was such a smart ass as a bartender. Right. And obviously I have performance background and all this. And I had just gotten out of a 6-year really bad relationship that I ended. So I ended that relationship, was looking for changes in my life. And this came along, and Richie's like, do this show. And I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I've been through enough. I'm misperforming. Acting's not going anywhere right now. So why not? Let me just try this thing out. So he gave me 3 months to prepare. He put my face on the flyer, and he told me I had to do a 10-minute set. Wow. Yeah.
Your very first time, 10 minutes.
Very first time, right?
I thought you were going to do an open mic minute or something.
Yeah, that's what it should be. That's what you should do first. But no, he had too much faith in me, and he was like, no, you got to do it. You got to do it. You're going to be great. I was like, all right. So I, had 3 months to prepare. And so I wrote a bunch of jokes the night before I was supposed to go up instead of preparing. Right. And I invited all my friends out and had like 17 people come for me. So at least I padded the audience, and they all got drunk and cheered me on. And I didn't do so bad. I recently watched my very first time on stage, and it wasn't horrible. I had jokes. Like, I understood the setup punchline format, right. I got it. I understood it. I can, I think that way anyway. And so that part the jokes were terrible. Like, when I look back, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so much better than all of those jokes. Right. But they weren't bad. Like, I guess the content was terrible because low hanging fruit stuff. Right. Right. But it was not terrible. And I knew how to perform, and I knew how to hold a mic and how to stand on stage without passing out or throwing up. Right. So it kind of was not terrible. It wasn't bad. And then after that night, that was it. Everything. I couldn't. You got up there as much as you could. Every second I could get on stage, I got on stage. And I was looking into all the open mics in town and all the shows and networking and going around and spending, 4 or 5 nights a week out at shows or mics, whether I was performing or just watching. Was it different back then now? Because I know Greg, and I just did a little stand-up, and it was okay. Like, it's a lot to get out there every night. Was it different? Because it's exploding now. Every pizza place and coffee shop has every brewery has a stand-up open mic, and sometimes. So yes, No, that's the biggest difference. You just hit the nail on the head. It was there just there weren't as many shows, right? And comedy hadn't hit the boom that it's in right now. Also, just because of, I think, Netflix and just because of online Instagram and all that. Mm-hmm. Now I think more people think they can be a comedian, which is fine. I mean, whatever, more the merrier, bring it on. Mm-hmm. But people are moving to Atlanta. Like, they're considering Atlanta as a serious place to do comedy, as like a serious comedy scene. And they're coming in from, Florida, all the Carolinas, Alabama. There's people moving here from Chicago. We've had a lot of comics move here from LA and New York who are like, we don't get enough stage time out there.
Yeah,
you have to wait in a line for 7 hours to sign up to get 4 minutes on stage, mm-hmm. In front of a crowd of who knows. But in Atlanta, you get quality stage time, quality audiences. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's people have been, all these great showrunners have made the reputation of Atlanta comedy so well respected, and it's badass. I mean, it's amazing how many opportunities there are to get on stage. But no, 8 years ago, it was not this many at all. So stand-up kind of took over my whole life, and I loved it. And still, obviously up until the quarantine, that was what I was doing most days. And I've been able to just be a professional stand-up comic and actor for the past 4 years, which was really nice. I was able to kind of quit my last day job back then. And sorry to interrupt. And you've been touring, and you tour with your husband sometimes, who's also a comedian? Yeah. So I toured regularly with him for like 4 years. Oh, okay. 4 to 5 years, really. Yeah. So my husband's he started stand up in like 2000, 2001. And he was like one of the big catalysts for why Atlanta comedy got so popular, actually. He started like a Comedy Gold rooms. I think it was called, Comedy Gold, back in like 2009, 2010, something like that. Mm-hmm. And he would bring in all these unknown comics who were up and coming, but he met them from working the road. So he was the first to ever bring like Rory Scovel and Kyle Kinane and Nate Bargatze and all these massive names in stand-up now. He was just buddies with, because he knew them from the road back then. And sorry, what's his name? Oh, my husband, Jared Harris. Jared Harris, right. Okay. Yeah. So now currently he's not doing stand-up full time like he used to. He kind of got over, he was burnt out and just tired of working the road. The road is terrible on your back and your mind and all that. But he used to, he built up stand-up comedy in Atlanta. He started working the road pretty early. Then he went and moved to New York and lived there for a while, pursuing stand-up. And then he lived in LA for several years. He was on Comedy Central. He was on, when George Lopez had a show, he was on there as like the stand-up comedian guest for that late night show. Cool. He had all these great opportunities and did all this really badass stuff. And then he had, his grandmother died while she was dying. And he was in charge of all that, in charge of her estate, I guess, and all that stuff. So he had to come back. Anyway, during that time when he came back in like 2012, like that was when his career was at the height of, everything. Right. And he came back over to deal with that. And that's when he met me. And then because he had so much to deal with over here in Georgia, like business to take care of, he ended up not moving back to LA, staying here, and then still touring and doing clubs from Georgia. And it's just more affordable to live here, obviously. Right. And, he met me, and, how do you not, stay here for me? And so, anyway, but then he kind of just stopped doing it full time a few years ago because he just got kind of burnt out. Okay. And that's the question is, can you talk a little bit about being on the road and what it was like for you? I've interviewed a couple of comics who've talked about being on the road and what it was like for them. Was it a good experience, a positive experience? Was it a grind? Oh, of course. Yeah, I mean, it is. It's all of those things, right? I mean, you can have all of it existing at the same time. It's exhausting physically, mentally to do that. But the best way to do it is travel with somebody who you travel well with. And when you're doing it alone, that sucks. Like I've definitely heard, my husband's told me stories so many times of times that he was alone on the road and traveling and in the car forever and ever and ever. And that can be way worse than traveling with somebody. But yeah, we enjoyed traveling together. We're very good in the car on long trips. I mean, like we've driven all the way to like Minneapolis to do shows from Georgia and then back. We loved it. We loved to be together. And gigs can be hit or miss, right? Like for me, that was always the dream, right? He's like the comedy veteran, you know, he'd been doing this for so much longer than I had when we started. So everything was new and fresh and magical and amazing. And it was me living my dreams. For him, it was like, same old, you know, no big deal. We get here, we go here. This is the place to eat in this town, and blah, blah, blah. So nothing was new or magical to him anymore at that point. And now I'm where he was then. So it's like
come full circle.
Yeah, it's full circle, which at the time I'd be like, why are you so bitter? Why are you so, you need to just enjoy it more and love. And now that I've like,
this is amazing.
Now that I've dealt with the industry and I understand like the seediness that can take place, like behind the scenes and all of that, and the promises that are made that are never followed through with. And, you know, those can be the negative parts. And I totally understand now where his annoyance and, you know, I guess bitterness was coming from. I understand it now, but all of that can exist, right? There's still great and wonderful things about the business and great, wonderful opportunities and amazing people, good people to work with, but there are still all the bad things too, right? But anyway, yeah, so traveling was great. That was my dream, was to just like wake up in a different town every night. I wanted to be on a stage. I wanted that performance experience of like, you know, a touring performer, and holy shit, it was amazing. Like to me, you know, even if we were going to like the middle of nowhere or, you know, whatever, it was still a new crowd, a new place. You're on stage, you're in a green room, you know, there's tickets, there's people, there's the bustling of the audience. You can hear everyone talking before you go out there. There's the feeling you get in the pit of your stomach before you go out and grab that mic and think, oh my God, these people could either hate me or they could love me. You know, these people can make or break me. And that, like that rush. And then once you get the first laugh on the first joke that they like, oh, there's nothing like it. It's a drug. It's full on drug. And I miss it. Good God, I miss it right now more than anything. But yeah,
let me just, can I just ask you, because I was an actor for 10 years and everybody would tell me, don't go to New York first, like go to a smaller town. New York will eat you up. Is there something about stand-up, like don't tour right away, don't, you know, do this right away? Like, is there any advice for people that are starting out?
Of course. And there's so many, but here's the thing. You can give advice all day long, but people are going to do what they're going to do, right? You cannot, there's nothing you can change about that feeling of when you start stand up and you feel like you have this confidence level. Once, if you're kind of good at it, just kind of good. Once you start and you're like, oh, I'm the next Sarah Silverman, or I'm the next Kevin Hart. Like, you know, you've done like 4 open mics and they were spaced out, you know, a month in between. You've done like 1 open mic a month and all your friends came. And I mean, when I started, I was on stage like every single week and then multiple times a week. Like I was right off the bat. But there's a lot of those people who are hobby comics and they'll do it and then they're like, oh, I'm next thing. And then you'll get, because I've been booking I feel like I'm trailing off, but I'm not. I promise it's all connected. I've been booking the open mic at the Punchline, the Atlanta Punchline, for the last like 4 years. And I'll get these emails of people, and this is how, like, brand new comics, you always know they're brand new because they're like, how do I get on stage? How do you book this? I can't wait. Like, I'm going to get up here. I can't wait to share my thoughts with the world. I'm the next George Carlin, blah, 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 blah. I can do however much time you need. I can do 30 minutes because I've got hours of material.
Oh, wow.
Can't wait to get up there for my first time. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, you're a moron. Like, what are you talking about? You've never even done an open mic and you think there's so much of this unfound confidence, like once you start. And then once you do start, if you haven't been eaten alive yet, you're, like I said, you only pack the audiences with your friends, then you think, I can do this. And then you haven't really learned yet. You haven't been eaten by the wolves yet by going to another town and hopping on stage and being, going out there and not knowing if you can face an audience for 30 minutes or not, like as a feature or headliner or whatever. And so there's a lot of those people, and then they get together with other open micers like that, and then they go, well, let's put on a tour. And then they get out there on the road, and they're like, you got to deliver. That's what people don't realize is you better have, and some people are amazing right off the bat, right? Maybe they're just incredible joke writers or whatever. There's like a weird, like Dave Chappelle, who like just comes out of the gate amazing. At like 17 years old with like fully written jokes and act outs and all this and can, improv and all this stuff. Most comics are not like that. Most comics need to hit an open mic in their hometown, over and over and over and over and over and over and over, be on stage multiple times a week, do that for a year, 2, 3 years to develop their voice, their jokes, make sure they're not just doing low hanging fruit or hacky jokes, make sure they're doing something original, and that they have formatted jokes that have been proven. The whole thing is to have proven jokes that work, so that when you're in a situation where maybe it's the biggest crowd you've ever performed in front of, or maybe weird things are happening in the room, or it's a town you've never been to, you've got to be able to just tap into that part of your brain that knows your jokes and knows your bits. And the only way to do that is to do it over and over and over and over and over again and build that stuff up in a safe place and then take it out on the road. The worst thing is be out on the road and not be prepared. And then people are like, what the hell did we just spend our money on?
Right.
Does any of that make sense? I know I just rambled like crazy. It
totally makes sense. I just have another question because I was talking to this guy, John Viner, who's a writer for Family Guy and Cleveland Show and all those shows. And he did stand up, and he said there's two kinds of comics. There's ones that are good writers, but they don't have a big personality on stage, or some people who are just naturally funny, but they can't write. And when you put it together, that's when the magic happens, or the really good comedian happens. Do you agree with that?
100%. Yeah. Okay. That's where the magic happens for sure. But and you can develop one, right? Like you can start out with just good stage presence, which I think I would put myself in that category, right? Like I'm not this prolific writer. I'm definitely not some kind of George Carlin has these amazing observations, but I'm quick-witted. I say funny things in conversation sometimes that I write down, and I know, and that turns into a joke, but I'm good on stage, right? I love being on stage. I'm super comfortable up there. So I have that natural, like I can make people feel comfortable because they're like, oh, okay, she's not going to embarrass herself and make us feel weird because she's comfortable up there.
Right.
And then you develop the writing skills over time.
Okay.
You just learn more about what jokes work. And then you do a joke so many times that it's boring. And now you've got to learn how to beef it up and tag it and write new things and try out new stuff. And then you got to develop a set. And then that all kind of lends itself to like your brand or your voice or whatever. So you can build up the other. And like if you start out as just a good writer and you don't have the other stuff, you can get better on stage by just being on stage all the time and rewatching your videos or re-listening to your tapes or taking feedback from other comics or taking feedback from audience members. Like you can make yourself a better performer. So yeah. But you need to do that. You need to give yourself a chance to be a better performer.
Years.
Don't come out of the gate. Yeah, it takes years. You can't just go, I'm funny, so give me money. That's not how it works.
Like, do you know Cherith Fuller?
Cherith, yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I worked with her at Cartoon Network at Turner, and she talked to me a lot about comedy, and she said that it took her 5 years to get 5 minutes of solid comedy on stage. I usually say like 5 minutes a year, like once you first start, like it takes you a full year if you're on stage like multiple times a night to get a killer 5. And it's not the same for everybody, right? 5 years for a killer 5 minutes is not, that's not unrealistic. And I know that sounds crazy to other people. It does sound crazy.
But it's really not. I kind of lucked up, though, because I was on the road with my husband, right? So I had like a decent 5 minutes, decent. And then when he took me on the road, he was taking me as his feature. And clubs, because they trusted him, trusted the feature he was bringing. And the feature is the one that goes up right before the headliner. And so he would just tell the club, nope, I'm bringing my own feature. They're not going to question it, right? They're not going to ask for a 30-minute tape of mine to make sure I can do 30 minutes. And so I was thrown to the wolves, and I had to fill in that space with jokes that I didn't have. And so I had to learn the hard way. Many, many times I've failed and flailed on stage trying to make up for that loose time. But you know what? The next night, if we were working a club that was like a six show weekend, so you got 1 show on a Thursday, 2 on a Friday, 2 or 3 on a Saturday, and then 1 or 2 on a Sunday, right?
Right.
So anywhere from like 6 to 7 shows. If I ate shit on a Thursday night, you best believe I was spending all Friday day in that hotel room or that comedy condo trying to write new jokes and going back and forth with Jared, like working material and seeing if this was funny, this was funny, this was funny. And then that night I was doing new jokes. But I had to because I was being paid and I had to do good. If I didn't do good, the club could be like, she sucks. We're going to put in our own feature. And I also didn't want my husband to have to go up on, or he wasn't my husband, just the guy I was dating at the time. I didn't want him to have to go up on stage and dig himself out of a hole I just created. So I had to learn how to be funny and learn how to write relatable jokes really fast.
Right. And I could talk to you about this all day, but I just have one last question. Bob Jurgens, who's a New York comedian, he doesn't do it anymore, but he did for years. He had a show in Times Square with a bunch of guys, and he did a lot of crowd work. And he said that is what every comedian tells you not to do. And he said, I had jokes and I made people laugh, but I was really good at crowd work. So I would be the first comedian. And how do you feel about crowd work? Do you feel that's hacky, or do you have to do it sometimes to warm them up?
No. Crowd work's not hacky at all. I mean, it can be. I take that back. It totally can be. You can be a hacky crowd work comedian. There's 2 ways of looking at it. There's the people who don't have jokes, so they rely on their crowd work alone, which can work in certain situations if you're lucky enough to have a crowd that you can work off of. But guess what? Most of the time, you can't guarantee who's going to be in that room and what the vibe is going to be in that room. You also can't guarantee that there's going to be enough people to work off of. A lot of times stand-up comedy seems glamorous, but it's not when you're in it. You could have one show, there's 4 people show up and you still got to do the show because the venue still puts on the show, right? And then how are you going to crowd work 4 people? What if they're not responsive? What if they don't want to participate? What if it pisses them off? What if one of them is a mean drunk and then takes over the whole rest of the show, or what if one of them is way smarter and way funnier than you and their quips are better than whatever you could come up with? You're going to eat shit and you're going to look terrible. And if you don't have jokes to to fall back on, then if you're relying on crowd work alone, you're going to put yourself in a hole that you can't get out of, right? So there's that, you don't want to just rely on crowd work, but there's also once you're big enough that you're touring and you're doing feature should never do crowd work. It should be left to the host and the headliner, but that's a whole different conversation. But the headliner, if you've been doing it a long time and you're going to be up there for an hour anyway, and something, crowd work can make a set, can beef up a set and make a set 1,000 times funnier because you're reacting to something in the moment, or you're calling on somebody in the audience, and then you make it like an inside joke with the crowd, and you always go back to that one same person that you talked to at the beginning, and then you bring them back in later, and then you bring them back again later, and you have a callback that involves the crowd member. Holy shit, people are like, that was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. So crowd work can make a comedian look better than they are, since they're good at it. Because then they can go back and forth between rehearsed planned jokes and a little crowd work. That, to me, that's the perfect balance. But I always tell new comics, don't worry about crowd work. Don't do it because you're not ready.
Right.
You need to have jokes first. You need to have well-rehearsed, well-written jokes before you start doing crowd work.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about, you're also an actor. And you did a Facebook watch show, Mrs. America. What was that like?
No, it was called Queen of America. Yeah, Queen America. Mrs. America is actually a really amazing show that's on Hulu right now, which has nothing to do with pageants at all, which has everything to do with the feminist movement in the late 60s, early 70s. But that's a different. Totally watch that. Queen America was a 1-season show. It was the first attempt that Facebook Watch did to have a scripted series,
right,
as opposed to like a talk show or a reality show. And it starred Catherine Zeta Jones. It came out in like 2018, I think, or late 2017 or 2018. I can't remember when we filmed. I think we filmed in 2017. Anyway, it was a pageant show. It was kind of campy. It was all about this pageant coach, which was played by Catherine Zeta Jones, she had her own demons to like battle. It wasn't. It was definitely a drama. It was probably a dramedy, I guess is the best way, because it definitely dealt with some serious subjects like eating disorders and things like that. But then it had some like funny moments too. So I got booked. I had an audition come through that they were looking for a comedic. They wanted somebody who most likely or who had pageant experience and was also a comedian. Or had comedy background. And when that audition came through my email, I was like, if I don't get this fucking
that's
role,
100% you. Yeah.
Where to God? Like, if I
better get this.
I better get this. If I don't get this, I'm quitting everything. Right. And it was so wild because they filmed it in Georgia, which was great, obviously. And it came through, and it was a home tape, right? It was a self-tape that you had to send in. It wasn't an in-person audition.
Okay.
And I did it, and I felt so good about it. It's so rare in acting, as you know, you've acted, like it's so rare to feel good about an audition. And I felt so good, and I was like, well, that's the sign that I'm not going to get it. Because anytime I'm like, I nailed it, that's when I don't get it. And when I'm like, oh, well, that was a joke, I'm so embarrassed, I can't believe I said and or did that, that's the one you get the call back for.
Right.
Right? So I did it, and I was like, no, I felt too good about it, I'm not going to get it. Boom, I got the call back. I go in for the callback, and lo and behold, the last 3 people standing for this job were me, this other girl who's a comic in Atlanta who I adore, and she's a way better actor than I am, but she has no real pageant experience, and then my very best friend in the entire universe.
Oh, whoops.
Yeah, she has no stand-up background at all, but she has a ton of improv experience, and she's done movies and TV for like the last decade, and she's incredibly talented and gorgeous. And she and I met doing pageants.
Wow.
Like 15, 16 years ago or something like that. We met doing pageants. We're best friends, in each other's weddings, all that good stuff.
But she didn't get it. You did.
She didn't get it. I did. So it came down
You're
to
so excited about it. It's your best friend. And this is so exciting. I beat my best friend.
That bitch has been in more movies than
right,
I could
enough
ever.
with her. It's my turn.
That's exactly what I said. I was like, I swear to God, it was just so funny that it came down to us two in that room. And we both knew it, obviously, And here's the worst part. She tells me later, after I got the role, she was like, just so you know, they told me I had the role. Then they started doing more auditioning the next week after I was confirmed for the role. I said, no way. She's like, yeah. So, I mean, I'm happy for you and all, but you took that from me. And I was like, well, it's meant to be, and I don't care.
Sorry. Sorry, bestie. Yeah.
Sorry, bestie. Yeah, maybe you should have brushed up on your stand-up experience.
Wow.
Yeah,
so did you get to work with Catherine Zeta Jones? And what was that like?
I did. I got to do so in the show, so I was supposed to be in 4 episodes. Only 2 of the 4 that I shot were aired.
Okay.
But what was so cool about that experience is they had simultaneously, like, they set up this fake Instagram account. So in the show, my role was a pageant TV show host. Okay. But I hosted like from home. I was like a former pageant woman who's obsessed with pageantry and knew everything about all of the girls competing, even though I had aged out years before, right? A little too close to home. Mm-hmm. And so I like ran this pageant talk show from my house called Pageant Watch. And that was my job. So I talked straight to camera, which was fantastic. Loved it. And they had the simultaneous, they actually put up, they made a Pageant Watch Instagram account to go with the show, right?
Okay.
So it looked like I was a real, like it looked real.
Yeah.
And so I got to do all this ancillary. That's how you say it, right?
Ancillary.
Thank you.
I think ancillary you put on salad, but.
Oh my God. Could you just take the ancillary off of the salad? So ancillary. So I got to do all this ancillary shooting. So I shot for the, like, what would be in the episodes, right? And then I had, like, all these extra days on set where I'd go in and I would just film. There was one day that I filmed a teleprompter set for 6 hours straight. I was filming. It was like 60 something pages of dialogue, but it wasn't really dialogue. It was just me. So it was 60 something pages of just me talking to screen on a teleprompter one day. And they used all of that for the little clips that they would put on Pageant Watch on the Instagram account. So it was really cool. I had like a double job with that. And I loved every single minute of it. I learned more. It was like the biggest gig I think I'd ever had that had been on television, quote television, even though it was Facebook Watch.
More people see Facebook than TV now, for sure. Exactly,
right?
Like
it was super high quality. I mean, obviously it had stars in it. Judith Light. Do you remember Judith Light?
I remember Judith Light. Some Ted Danza show or something.
From Who's the Boss?
Who's the Boss? Yeah.
Yes. So Judith Light from Who's the Boss. She was in it. I was in the makeup trailer with her one day. I mean, it was amazing. It was the coolest thing I'd ever done in my life. So I had a couple scenes with Catherine Zeta Jones in the 2 episodes that aired. I was in her hand. So like she's watching my pageant show to see what I'm saying about her client on her phone in her hand is what aired on TV. But what aired on the Instagram account was an interview that I did with her face to face. I did 2 interviews with her face to face that aired on Instagram. So, yeah.
And was she nice? I don't know. I mean, she used to be the biggest star in Hollywood. So
she was exactly the biggest star in Hollywood, and so she's that. When you meet her, she's all of the things that you would think that she is. She is. She's larger than life. You know, she walks into a room and like she's a huge presence. She's drop dead gorgeous. But she's definitely not. I would not describe her as accessible or like down to earth.
Okay.
Is that the best?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
No, we'll just stop there. We'll just let that stay right there.
She is. I mean, it's literally you're standing next to a legend. You know, freaking Chicago, name it. I mean, it's weird how huge she is. Like she's a freaking Oscar winner, and you're like getting to work in a scene with her. It was bizarre.
Very cool.
Wild.
Very cool.
Very cool. Very cool.
And do you want to talk about teaching or the podcast or both?
We can talk about all that. Well, the other acting, just I've got another acting gig that's like that I got to do last year. Right. That was the to this day is now the coolest, biggest, most, my favorite thing I've ever done, which I got to be in. I have 2 lines in this very quick, short part, but it's in the new Steve Carell movie that Jon Stewart directed and wrote called Irresistible. So I filmed that last summer and I got to sit in the green room on set with Steve Carell and Topher Grace. And I was directed by Jon Stewart. So yeah, that was the fucking coolest moment of my entire life.
That's very cool. And were you in a scene with Topher or Steve or?
No, it'll just be me. And there's so I'm a reporter. So I'm supposed to be a Daily Show type correspondent who is out in the field, and I'm trying to get an interview from the main, the star of the film. But instead of him, I get these random ass people that come up and ask me weird things instead. So it's a really funny moment. It was really funny to film. I don't know you never know when you're filming how much is going to end up in the work, but hopefully they keep that in there. I was told that scene related to another scene later in the movie because it's like a joke, like a running joke.
Right.
So hopefully they'll keep that in. But yeah, it was really fucking cool. But yeah, Jon Stewart hung out and talked to me afterward. He's like, "Oh man, I used to perform with the Atlanta Punch." He's like, "You're the stand-up comedian, right?" He came up to me between shots and said that, and I was like, "Yeah." he's like, you perform at the Punchline? I was like, yeah, that's my home club, like that and the Laughing Skull. But yeah, I'm at the Punchline all the time. And he's like, oh man, I was there back in the day. And he said, I'll never forget smoking cigarettes in the back of the Punchline. And I was like, yeah, well, Marcy, the GM, who was the GM in the 80s, is still the GM. He's like, no shit. He's like, I want to make a video for her. Let's put a video on your phone and send it to Marcy. And I like did a video like with Jon Stewart on my phone, and oh my God, that was amazing. Talk about legends, comedy legend. You know, that was, oh man.
Yeah, he started out in stand-up for sure. I remember hearing about him in New York for sure.
Before Daily Show and all that stuff, yeah. So yeah, that was amazing. But so then I ended up starting a comedy class a couple years back, and it was mainly just, you know, little extra source of income at first. I was just like, I need to make a little money doing this because my husband's not like touring, you know, anymore. And so I'm still touring, but I was kind of in this in-between space where I'm like a feature, but I was also doing headlining work, but not, you know, not a household name or anything. So it's harder, you know, without massive credits to get on the club headlining roster. Right. So headlining a lot of like independent gigs, little one-offs and stuff. That's what I do. But anyway, so I needed something. I had a bunch of women in Atlanta who had at different points in time asked me to work with them with their stand-up. And they're like, hey, could I just work with you per hour for you to help me? And then eventually I was helping like 3 people regularly. And they were like, you should just teach a class. You're really good at helping someone with their material. And like editing and helping put things in the right order and giving tags and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know. I don't want to get, you know, because in the industry, you're kind of looked down upon when you start teaching.
Okay.
Yeah. They're like, oh, you're not taking it seriously because you're just teaching. You're just giving up or you're a sellout or whatever. But I was like, you know what? I love working with women. So let me just try. I'm going to put out an all women's comedy workshop, like a 6-week thing. And I talked to the Punchline. They were cool with it. We came up with a deal for me to do it. And I put it out there. The class sold out like almost immediately. It was a big success. All the women who took it loved it, even though I was just learning how to teach it. You know, I was making up my curriculum as I went along. Right. They had a fucking blast. Like I said, I did women's only. And their graduation show was amazing. They went and told all these other women and then I was like, oh my God, I have to have another class now because there's so many people asking me about it. Fast forward to a little over 2 years later, and I've had almost 200 graduates come through. I've had 17 classes.
Wow.
Yeah. And it just won't stop. I have even during the quarantine, I've got a waiting list, 30 people long.
Yeah, I remember seeing it on Facebook because a lot of female comics that I'm friends with would be like, I took the class, or come see the class, or come see the graduation, or they're always posting about it.
That was a big pull, is like we sell out the Punchline for almost every single graduation show. We've had like 200-seater sold out shows, which I don't think that's a lot of people ever going to happen again.
For comedy, Yeah,
it was wild. So that's a big draw for people. They're like, oh my God, you get to work 6 weeks with a bunch of other women, and you know, whether you want to pursue comedy or not.
You can't do the class now. You can't teach it on Zoom, right? You just have to wait.
No. I mean, there's ways, and there's definitely people out there who are teaching like stand-up workshops online. What I've decided to do instead is I put my in-person ones on hold, right? I'm going to start those back in the summer. So we're going to start those back in June.
Okay.
And we're following, you know, obviously I've got all this stuff in place, like everybody's going to have their own mic cover. We've got, you know, touchless like entry. People are going to come in through an open door, seat everybody like 10 or more feet apart. Nobody's together on the stage. Everything's wiped down with antibacterial wipe, blah, 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 blah. So we're going to have to do all that. And then for the grad show, we're just going to have to figure out, we might just have to do it with only the class and the audience, you know, to film their like final 5-minute set that they're going to write.
Right.
And then just stream it for their families, or just create little videos. People can decide what they want. We can either stream it to friends and family, or I can just make a video of each, you know, student's set, and then they can send it to whom they wish to see it. So, but yeah, I don't think a 200-person packed out, sold out room is going to happen again anytime in the near future.
Yeah, who knows? And until there's a vaccine. So tell me about the podcast. And I'm interested because I went on your website and you and your co-host Catherine are both holding knives. Why are you holding knives?
So the podcast is called Cheaties, and we came up with the idea because I have this bit that I love doing on stage. It's like a big act out or squat down on stage. I say all this, one of my favorite jokes that I've written. I've been doing it for the past couple of years, and it's all about how when I caught my ex cheating. Yeah. And all the steps that you have to take, right? If you're going to collect all the information off the phone, you got to scroll. First of all, you got to squat down. You got to get low because if they wake up, you just throw yourself under the bed and you wait till they go back to sleep. And then you go back to recon. So, go through the phone, keep one eye on him, one eye on the phone. Then you got to scroll screenshot. Then you got to delete the screenshots. Then you got to text yourself the screenshots, then delete the screenshots and go in the text conversation and delete the screenshots that you already texted to yourself. You got to cover your tracks, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So then Catherine, so that's a bit I've been doing for a while, like I said. And then Catherine was dating a comic for 3 years, and she caught him cheating on her. They were living together and all that. And she literally said while she's going through his phone, she's like, all she's thinking about is my bit. And she's like, part of her is so angry. She's like shaking, angry. Right. And her relationship's about to be over, and she's, the worst case scenario, she's catching him cheating and all this, but all she can think about is, I'm literally pulling a lace right now. And so she calls me a couple days later to tell me all this, and we were just laughing our asses off while simultaneously, being pissed off at him and, looking up this girl online and all this stuff that he cheated on her with. Anyway. It's just crazy. Just it was half funny, but more than anything, it kind of through that conversation, we were like, oh my God, we should have a freaking podcast where we talk, because everyone has cheating stories. Everyone does, right? Whether they've cheated or been cheated on or whatever, whether it was 20 years ago or last week or, everyone has it. And everyone, even if it was a long time ago, you still get heated when you talk about it. And it's just, people love it. Why is Jerry Springer and Maury Povich been so popular? Right. Everyone loves a scandal. And so I was like, let's do it. And I said, I can just see it now. And I don't know why, but it just came to my head. I pictured us with a bowl of cereal, holding a bowl. And I eventually put the little emojis, the scared face emojis in the bowl where the cereal should be. And I was like, I picture us, instead of holding spoons, holding knives, and we're on the box or cereal cover box, and it's called Cheaties instead of Wheaties. Perfect. And that was it. And that's all. That's it hilarious. Came to me because I was like, what would we call a podcast like that? And literally because I saw that image of us on a cereal box. That's how the whole podcast was birthed.
Nice.
Yeah. And then we were like, fuck it. And so we ran with it. And what we do is we have callers. People call us and leave us voicemails. And we pick the voicemail and then we play it. And then we call that person and have them, we interview them and they tell us their whole cheating story.
Oh, cool. I didn't get to that part. I listened to episode 1. It was you guys talking about making or starting the podcast. Yeah. I didn't know you did that. I'll listen to some more. Yeah.
So so that's we spent the first couple, I think 2 or 3, just kind of telling our stories and just ramping people up to get people excited about call us with your stories and all that. But we kind of wanted to lay the groundwork and let people meet us and know what was behind the whole creation of this. Starting with episode 3 or 4, I think, is when we start doing the interviews with people. Okay, so cool. Every Friday we kind of catch up and then we play voicemails. And then the Monday episode that comes out every week is us interviewing people. And most of the people who've called in are other comics. We interviewed one of my good friends in LA who's a comic who's been on Comedy Central and all that good stuff. So that was the episode 14 was an interview with her. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like a lot of fun. All right. It's fun. This has been great, Lace, and I don't want to end it right now. I just want to ask you, if you have any advice for, you talked a little bit about being on the road, any advice for new comics or actors, and then just talk a little bit about what you see as the future of comedy. You talked a little bit about, having the cover on the mic, but really just what do you see when comedy comes back? What does that look like?
Oh, man.
You might not know. You don't have to answer if you don't know.
I think about this every day because my whole life is on hold right now.
Right.
So the sad part about all of this has been fun to talk about and reminisce, and I ramble on because it's my whole life and I love it and I have a million things to say about it. But it's terrifying. Like I had so many gigs lined up. I had a radio gig lined up. I was about to take on a little radio job. I had a couple
parts. Why can't you do the radio job?
So they sent all of their main DJs home to work from their home studios. Okay. And I was new. Like I had a trial run that they had hired me for like 2 weeks for a trial run.
Oh, okay.
And because I wasn't an official DJ yet, like I was going to join in as a co-host with an afternoon, like a drive home DJ in Atlanta on a station. And I'll start, we can just say, cause I put it online. It was Star 94.
Right.
And so it was my trial run, and they were most likely leaning to they would hire me, but they just needed to hear me on air for a few days, for 2 weeks first. And then that literally was supposed to start the week of March 16th.
Wow.
So yeah, I got to go on air 2 days, and that was it. And I had fun. I had great feedback from the station and listeners and all that. But then that's the week that they decided to send all the DJs home. And since, they weren't going to have me go to that co-host's house, like the main host's house.
Right.
So yeah, that sucks. But that was a gig. I was supposed to do some TV stuff. I had a small part in a small film that was going to be filmed remotely. That all went, obviously went to shit. All the classes I was supposed to be teaching all are on hold indefinitely. Well, hopefully we start back in June. That's my plan. And then of course I had tours. I had 2 different small tours that I was supposed to be on, that all the gigs were all set up. I was, it just, everything.
It's like everything, yeah.
Everything, every single thing that I do for my job is screwed. Like we're on hold completely. So I honestly don't know. It's hard to start thinking about it and talk about it without getting really depressed. And only see the worst, Unfortunately, as a comic, you're very cynical most of the time. So it's so hard for that cynical side not to take over.
I think that all that stuff will be back. It'll just be different.
It'll be different.
And,
It's like flying, right? Like it's like flying pre 9/11 and post 9/11. Like there's going to be a big learning curve and a big change, but it'll eventually start happening again, and it'll feel more normal.
And once the vaccine happens, then it's game time. Like everything's back. I hope so. Right?
That's what I'm hoping.
I would imagine. If you have a vaccine, it's okay to take the vaccine and get rid of it.
Totally. I agree. And I hope so too. But I think there's just going to be a weird, there's going to be a weird time where things aren't normal and there's very small crowds, which, hey, if you're a comic and you've been doing it long enough, you're used to performing in front of small crowds. Not all of them could be winners. Not all of them are 200. Packed out people. Yeah, packed out crowds. So you know what? I think we're all prepared, and I think we're all so desperate to get on stage. I've done like a bunch of these little online shows, and man, they're fine, but they are not stand up. It is not the same in any way whatsoever. It's nice to have an outlet, and I think that all these people who got famous or who are really good online and who, just are used to talking to their cameras every day or doing characters or whatever. They do these like online sketches, and they've been spending their time doing that instead of being on stage. Those are the ones that we actually shit on constantly in comedy. We're like, oh, those are just Instagram comics. They're the ones thriving right now. And we're all the assholes who are out of work because we rely on live in-person, crowds. And so all these people who we've been making fun of have actually been doing the right thing. And now I'm like, shit, I've got to figure out how to be funny online. Oh, man, this sucks.
Yeah, I just think that the thing that I tell myself, and I don't know if you're going to be like, screw that, but is that we'll never have a time like this again in our lives where we just have a break.
Yeah,
because we just keep going and going and going. And
that's
then, you're retired.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. No, you're totally right. And I mean, yeah, that's the one silver lining of it. But I guess it's easier to see that if you're still working.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. You need to have some income, but they're opening restaurants, they're opening stuff. It's going to be soon. I would say like at the beginning of next month, things will be like spread out with masks, but they'll be happening.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. I just don't know what the future of stand-up's going to look like, I mean, because stand-up online is just not, it's just, there's nothing like live stand-up comedy. And,
It's like the theater. It's not the same.
It's like the theater. It'll never be the same. I mean, I don't know, man.
Right. And just last thing, any advice you would give to people, not discounting, forgetting about the COVID, but just like for a long career in comedy, make sure you really love it, or make sure you really want to do it, because it's a rough road. It's a long road. What would you say? It's a long road.
It's a rough road. Yeah, you're totally right. I guess knowing and understanding, having respect for the art form, I think, and not like it's everyone early on has this, like I said, this unfounded confidence, but get past that, get past the narcissistic part of it, and then start to pay attention and respect the art form and respect the time that needs to be put into it to develop yourself into the best comedian possible, and understand that it is a long game. It is a long game, very long. There's so many people who are like, I didn't even know my own voice on stage until I was 10 years in, and I'm sitting here 8 years in, and I still have so many benchmarks to hit, and I still have so many goals to reach, before I'm, I'm still a baby in the game 8 years in. So you've got to know that you've got to put a lot of hard work into it. It's not something you just pick up and you try a couple times and then you make it. You can have a long lasting career in stand up and not be a household name, but you have to put the work in to make that happen. So yeah, I mean, the advice I always give people pre-quarantine or pre-COVID is get on stage. If you want to do it, get on stage. I teach a comedy class, but you don't have to have a comedy class so it sounds crazy for me to be telling people that, but you don't. It makes it easier, and you kind of get a fast forward, into the game by taking a class, obviously, you're more well prepared for it, but just get on stage. If you want to do it, stop waiting, just do it. Write jokes and try it, because the only way to make those jokes better and to get better is doing it a million times.
Right. And last question, it just came to me. Would you do something like Saturday Night Live, or do you feel like your comedy is better just by yourself on stage?
Oh, I mean, God, Saturday Night Live is like one of my favorite things in the world. I mean, I obsessively love it and have since I was a kid.
Yeah, me too.
I just don't, I didn't put my time and effort into being a sketch comedy writer or actor. And I feel like there are people who've dedicated their whole lives to, leading up to like
doing that,
working on SNL. Right. And I just didn't take that path. I was working on other things, and I definitely think I thrive better in stand-up. I'm just better live stand-up on stage, telling my jokes and not having to work with an ensemble. Right. I think that I'm just better that way. But hell, at this point, I am willing to take any and every single opportunity possible that's adjacent, comedy adjacent. Right. I would probably see myself better as like a writer for stand-up or for SNL than
a performer,
one of the actors, unless I started right now and started, really focusing on honing that improv sketch muscle. But I don't know. That is such a far off thing that to even, obviously it's the dream, hosting SNL is the fucking dream.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's, man.
Well, good luck. You're hilarious, and it's been great talking to you. And
thanks, Shawn.
I hope everything comes back for you. And this has been so much fun.
I hope so.
Story.
Sorry. I feel like I kind of rambled and,
No, it's great. It's great to hear, what people are successful, what they did and how they got there. So it's been awesome.
Thanks.
So thanks so much, Lace, and good luck. And I hope to see you out there. I'll be in the audience sometime.
Same. All right. Thanks a lot. All right.
Thanks,
bye.
Lace. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Lights Camera Pro podcast, where entertainment pros talk about how they made their dream into a career.
Thanks for listening, and subscribe to our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. Thanks to Bob Juergens for the Rockin' VO and Joseph McDade for the music. Tune in next time when we have my good friend Steve Henderson, a VO pro teacher and guru, the voiceover guy that everybody goes to get better at voiceover. Check it out next time.